The 2024 elections were the largest ever elections held in the history, lasting for 44 days from 19th April to 1st of June 2024. Close to 8,500 plus candidates and more than 740 political parties contested for 543 seats in Lok Sabha. With approximately 970 million people eligible to vote out of 1.4 billion population, it makes these elections the largest and the biggest festival of democracy in the whole world. If you remember, the first general election in India were held in the year 1952, which gave us our first Prime Minister, that is Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Now, in this election season, a lot of questions must be popping up in your mind. That how we as a country are able to hold such huge elections and elections at such a humongous scale. What is the election machinery or electoral mechanism of the elections in our country? How Prime Minister in our country is elected? All these questions we'll be trying to answer in this particular session.
To India next, where the general election is underway.
Nearly 1 billion registered voters, 470 million of them women.
Top leaders across party lines are leaving no stones unturned in wooing voters.
Hello, my name is Preetpal Singh and today's topic is the great Indian elections. Now at this juncture, we must remember our freedom, our right to vote, our very own democracy, none of that was easily achieved. Countless heroes, countless freedom fighters laid out their lives so that we can live in peace, we can make our own future and we can survive with freedom. So a lot of innumerable heroes and freedom fighters' lives were lost for fighting for our freedom. So we must respect that. Ideals of freedom fighters and heroes like Mahatma Gandhi ji, Shahid Bhagat Singh, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Rani Lakshmi Bai and B.R. Ambedkar and hundreds and thousands of other freedom fighters, their ideals ignite the torch of democracy in our country and they make the democracy in our country eternal, and it is continuing till this date and it will continue in the future as well. Now with regard to the 2024 general elections, now one very important thing to note here is that legislative assembly elections of 4 states, that is Arunachal Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Odisha and Sikkim, are being held simultaneously with these general elections. Now this fact a lot of people might not know, but these 4 legislative assembly elections are being held simultaneously with the general elections of 2024. Now Article 83 of our Indian Constitution requires election to be held every 5 years for the Lok Sabha in our country. Lok Sabha, that is the lower house, and upper house of the country, of course, it is Rajya Sabha. Now, the elections in our country happens with the single member constituency using the first past the post system. The 104th Amendment to our Indian Constitution abolished the 2 seats which were reserved for the Anglo-Indian community in our Lok Sabha. Now, as you all know, that elections to the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies in our country happens on the basis of universal adult franchise. That is, every Indian citizen who is above the age of 18 is eligible to vote, unless they are disqualified by any particular provision of any particular law in our country. Now, Article 324 to Article 329 of Part 15 of our Indian Constitution deals with the electoral machinery in our country or electoral system in our country. And based on the electoral machinery and electoral system in our country, we should know that what is the hierarchy and what are the different systems with which we are able to hold elections at such a magnitude and such a humongous scale in our country. At the top, it is of course the Election Commission of India. Now, according to Article 324, Election Commission of India is established, and Election Commission of India is given the power or is given the authority or is authorized for superintendence, direction and control of elections in Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies in our country. And Election Commission of India, it announces the election schedule through a major press conference. Also after that, the Model Code of Conduct for guidance of candidates and political parties comes into effect immediately after this announcement by the Election Commission of India. Now at the top, of course, there is Election Commission of India, but under Election Commission of India, there are chief electoral officers for every state and union territory. So at the top it is ECI, Election Commission of India. Now Election Commission of India will appoint for each state or each union territory chief electoral officers. Now they will also be having the authority and it will be their duty to supervise and control elections in that particular state and that particular union territory. Now under those chief electoral officers, for every district in the state, there will be district election officers. That is DEO. So at the top it is ECI, then there is chief election officer for each state, then there is district election officer for each district. Again, the responsibility is same for managing the elections in that particular district. Now, under the district election officer, there are returning officers. Now, returning officers are for particular constituency, particular legislative assembly constituency, Lok Sabha constituency. So, at the top, it is Election Commission of India, then it is CEO, then it is district election officer, then it is returning officer. Now, under every returning officer, there is presiding officer. Presiding officer is responsible for conduct of elections in a particular polling booth. So that is how the hierarchy is maintained. I will again repeat the hierarchy for you. At the top, it is Election Commissioner of India, then it is Chief Electoral Officer, then it is District Election Officer for every district, then under every district for every constituency, there is a returning officer. Now, under every constituency for every polling booth, there is presiding officer, that is PO. This is how electoral machinery in our country is set up for smooth conduct of elections in our country. Also, additional to that, Election Commission of India deploys certain governmental officers as observers to the elections as well for the smooth conduct of the elections. Now, Indian Constitution allows Parliament of India to make laws regarding the conduct of elections to the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies in our country. So on the basis of that, our Parliament has enacted two very prominent laws. One is Representation of People Act 1950. Another is Representation of People Act 1951. We call it as RPA 1950 and RPA 1951. Now, RPA 1950, it deals with the provisions related to qualification of voters, preparation of electoral rolls, delimitation of constituencies, and allocation of seats in the Parliament and the state legislature. Now, RPA 1950 was not very exhaustive. Now, in order to have an act which particularly deals with how elections in our country are fought, we came up with RPA 1951. And the then Law Minister of India, that is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, introduced this act in the Parliament. Now, RPA 1951, it deals with a variety of issues. It deals with the actual conduct of elections in our country. It deals with the administrative machinery for the conduct of elections in our country. It deals with the registration of political parties in our country. It deals with qualification and disqualification of member of parliaments as well. And it deals with election disputes and any corrupt practices and offences related to elections. All these things are being dealt by the Representation of People Act 1951. That is why it is the most prominent and the most important act supervising the elections in our country. Now, in 2003, what happened? That Election Commission of India gave certain directions to every candidate who is wanting to be elected to the Parliament and state legislature. They have to declare proper details of any criminal cases pending against them, of any conviction of theirs in any of the cases, of the total assets and liabilities which they hold, also the total wealth which they have, alongside the educational qualification of that particular person. So all these things have to be mentioned in an affidavit given by the Election Commission of India. It is very, very important. Now, in 2009, under Section 126A of the Representation of People Act 1951, it banned publishing of exit polls by the news agencies, by the media at the time when the elections are going on. Again, a very significant provision, significant step taken by the Election Commission of India. Now, you must have heard in news multiple times, this particular member of parliament has been disqualified from the parliament, or certain MPs being disqualified from being the member of the parliament. Now, why such disqualification happens and what law governs it? So, Section 8 of the same Representations of People Act deals with the disqualification of the member of parliament in relation to certain offences. Now, under this RPA 1951, there is Section 8, right? There is Section 8 subsection 1, there is Section 8 subsection 2, and there is Section 8 subsection 3. So if a person commits any offence which is mentioned under Section 8 subsection 1 or Section 8 subsection 2, they are immediately disqualified for the next 6 years. Now, these offences includes offences like rape or offences in relation to drug, or if a person is trying to create a religious animosity between the communities, or if the case is regarding untouchability or sati practice, right? But there is Section 8 subsection 3. Now, under this, if a member of parliament or a member of legislative assembly is convicted of a crime whose punishment is more than 2 years, that person is disqualified for 6 years after the person's sentencing ends. So, the disqualification is for the 6 years from the time of release. Then is disqualified for 6 years after the person's sentencing ends. So, the disqualification is for the 6 years from the time of release. Now, based on these laws, the member of parliament can be disqualified. Of course, there are other provisions as well, but for now, this is what is very important for us to know. Now, as you remember, in 1985, 52nd Amendment Act to the Constitution was enacted. Now, it gave 10th schedule to our Indian Constitution, and the law is very commonly and famously known as anti-defection law. Now, under this particular act, it provided for disqualification of a member of parliament or a state legislature on the ground of defection from one political party to another political party. So, if a person shifts from one political political party to another political party while being a member of parliament, that person will be disqualified under this anti-defection law. Of course, there are several exceptions to it as well, but broadly we should know about anti-defection law as well, because it is very important in relation to the electoral process in our country. Now coming to the most sought after question which all of you have been waiting for, that how Prime Minister in our country is elected. Now, contrary to the popular belief, and you all must also not know about this, that in our constitution there is no specific provision for the election of Prime Minister. Our constitution under Article 75 says that President will be appointing the Prime Minister of our country. Now, Article 75 of our Indian Constitution says that the Prime Minister of our country will be appointed by the President. Now, normally this does not mean that President can appoint anyone which they wish, anyone whom they wish to be the Prime Minister of the country. No, that is not the case. According to the convention, the leader of the majority party of the Lok Sabha, that is the party which has gained more than 50% of the total seats, that is 50% of the 543 seats of the Lok Sabha, a party which is having more than those seats, the leader of that particular party becomes the Prime Minister of the country. So that person, that leader of that majority political party in the Lok Sabha, will be appointed as the Prime Minister by the President. Now, your logical question might be that what if a particular political party is not able to cross the 50% threshold mark? Now, in that case, you must have heard of coalitions. So in that case, the leader of the coalition or the leader of the single largest party in the Lok Sabha will be appointed as the Prime Minister by the President of India. However, the Prime Minister would have to prove his or her majority in the Lok Sabha within 1 month. So vote of confidence should happen in the Lok Sabha within 1 month if this scenario prevails. Now, coming to certain facts regarding elections in our country. Now, according to section 126 under the RP Act, there is a provision of silent period. Now, 48 hours before the ending of the polls, there is a silent period which is kept. Now, in this particular period, the district magistrate issues orders under the section 144 of the CRPC 1973, prohibiting unlawful assemblies and also limiting the gathering to not more than 5 people. However, door-to-door campaigning in this period is definitely permitted. But what is not permitted is election campaigns. What is not permitted is electoral advertisements by the political parties. And also opinion polls are not permitted. And also one more important fact, that at this period of time, there is a ban on the sale of liquor as well. Now, this particular election saw more than 10.5 lakh polling stations, more than 1.5 crore polling staff and security personnel, and also more than 55 lakh electronic voting machines, that is EVMs, and also more than 4 lakh vehicles being used for the conduct of this particular election. Now, in 2024, for the first time in the history, Election Commission of India has allowed the person suffering from any disability and people who are above the age of 85 years to vote from the vicinity of their home. Again, which is a very important step in the right direction and an electoral reform for which Election Commission of India should be appreciated. Now, in the current elections, there are 2 major alliances which are fighting for the position of the Prime Minister and for the seats in the Lok Sabha. First is the National Democratic Alliance, which we call as NDA, where the main party is BJP, and second is the India Alliance, that is Indian National Development and Inclusive Alliance. And here the main party is the Congress party. Now, since we have a fair bit of information about how electoral process in our country happens, keeping all these things aside, I want you all to focus on the several issues plaguing our Indian elections. What are the prominent issues because of which our Indian electoral system suffers? Now, I have divided those reasons among 4 different heads. First is the criminalization of politics. Now, 40% of the elected MPs of the Lok Sabha are having some or the other criminal case pending against them. Second is the money and the muscle power which is utilized. Now, with this in mind, the political funding and the case of electoral bonds also gets highlighted. So first is the criminalization of politics. Second is the use of muscle power and money power. Third issue is that of low voter turnout. Now, you must have heard in news also, at some places the voter turnout was even less than 40%.
Well, I mean, a lower turnout to begin with, it's not good because in India we have seen over the past few elections or several elections in the past, it's been a continuous rise. So,
has been derived from the low voter turnout. The BJP's rivals are convinced that the low voter turnout has hurt the party.
Some places it was 50%, some places it was 60%. So it hovers around 50 to 60%, which is a low voter turnout for a country like India where democracy is very, very important. And the fourth very prominent issue is the vote bank politics. That means usage of religion, usage of caste, usage of creed, usage of community, and all these ethnicities to garner vote. Of course, it creates a divide in the society, and it creates animosity between different communities, between different sections of the society. So all these four issues are plaguing our Indian electoral system. Now, of course, continuous efforts by the Election Commission of India, by the central government of India, by the political parties, by the civil societies of our country, and by the judiciary needs to be there in order to ensure that the electoral reforms in our country keeps on happening and they are not halted. So electoral reform should evolve over a period of time. As we change from time to time, electoral reform should also be there, and we as a system, we as a democracy should also evolve with those electoral reforms, and we should take measures so that these issues which are plaguing our Indian democracy can be solved at the earliest. Now, this 2024 general elections, now it has to be very closely contested elections in the recent memory so far. Now, the voter turnout, the battleground states, and the key issues of the elections, they play a very decisive role in who is to win these elections. So also social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, they also have a very huge role to play in the electoral politics of India currently. By the time we release this video, you would already know that who is going to make the next government and who is going to be the next Prime Minister. And if you won't know, then that means there is going to be a coalition government. Now the question here is not that who will be the Prime Minister. Of course, a person who is well deserved should be the Prime Minister. Now the question here is not that who will win and who will lose. But the thing is that eventually whoever wins or loses, our democracy should win. Eventually our country should remain and our democracy should win. Now I would like to end this session with a very famous quote of our former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji.
सत्ता का खेल तो चलेगा, सरकारें आएंगी जाएंगी, पार्टियां बनेगी बिगड़ेंगी, मगर ये देश रहना चाहिए, इस देश का लोकतंत्र अमर रहना चाहिए.
Now he said that satta ka khel chalega. The game of power will go on. Governments will come and go. Political parties would be formed and broken. But this country shall remain. The democracy of this country should remain eternal. Now, with this thought in mind, I hope you gained some new perspective in this session. I would like to know your comments and ask any of the questions which you might have. I'll be very happy to answer them. All the very best and have a great day. Thank you.